The President and the First Lady have coronavirus. Now, we wish them well, but this is phenomenal in political terms.
It certainly is, and we do wish them well. And but in political terms, it's unbelievable, because the irony of all of this president who downplayed the coronavirus and the severity of it, he even confessed to, actually was proud of saying that he had covered it up basically because he didn't want to scare everyone, even though he knew how severe it was way back in February and didn't take much action. So it is very ironic. I hope he gets better, and I hope Melania gets better as well. But it's something to see, and you know, it's going to have an impact. He can't campaign for the next couple of weeks for sure, the way he likes to, with 35,000 people around him, with not too many wearing masks either. But he can't even get those crowds right now because he's trying to recover. And that's the most important thing.
And there's a political irony here, because he's been calling Joe Biden Sleepy Joe, and he can't stay awake, and he's got no energy. And here he is, Joe Biden, running up the stairs on his way to Michigan, and the president's domiciled at the White House.
It's quite a reversal, isn't it, in terms of the imaging and what the president tried to portray of Joe Biden. But here's something else interesting, that the three key swing states which put Trump in the presidency last time in 2016, and that would be Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. These states, Biden is almost 6 points ahead of the president in the polling there. So I think he brought back many of those blue-collar voters who had left the Democratic Party, left Hillary Clinton, who had voted for President Obama prior election before that. And they had left the Democrats and gone to President Trump, and that's how he made it. Well, this time, Biden's brought them back, it looks like, in those three states. He's even ahead in some states like Arizona by a couple of percentages, which are traditional Republican states. So I think that the president has a lot to do to bring back his supporters, or boost them up, because the Biden people are fired up and they're ready to go, basically. And it seems to me, if the election were held today, then Biden would win the electoral votes and the popular vote. But it's not being held today. A lot could happen. This is the October surprise. This is an amazing October surprise that happened with the president and his wife getting the coronavirus.
Look, it's a gripping movie or a series, there's little doubt, but it's very hard to predict what happens next. It's been that kind of time. It's been that kind of year. How do you think this will affect the presidential race?
I think it could have an impact depending on how he and his wife fare, but especially the president. If he gets better pretty quickly or doesn't get very, very ill and weathers it through very fast and rapidly and gets better within 2 weeks, he can come back actually with some people a bit stronger. Some of his own people will feel even strengthened, because they'll say, look, it wasn't that big a deal anyway. This is something anyone can get through, and I did it. And so this could boost him. On the other hand, if he does get semi-severely ill or severely ill, that could have a tremendous impact on the outcome of the race and on how the American government functions, because we're going to be talking about the possibility of succession. And that would bring to mind something like the 25th Amendment of the Constitution, which sets the ground rules for how a president incapacitated can be replaced by the vice president.
Could there be a chance of the election being postponed?
I doubt it, because we have almost 5 weeks still before the election, and the COVID time period for when someone recovers from it, if they recover, is about 2 weeks. So he'll still have 3 weeks to campaign. It's not going into the election itself. It's just the election campaign season, within which he'll lose about 2 weeks. But I don't think there's a way to postpone it unless the Congress decides to do so. Because the president cannot postpone the election, the Supreme Court cannot postpone the election, only the U.S. Congress can postpone the election. And one house is heavily in the Democratic hands as it is right now. And I don't think even the Republicans would want to postpone the election. It's a very serious affair to do. It's never been postponed before, ever, even during the 1980 pandemic flu. Never happened.
Professor, this is an insidious, dangerous virus. It's killed over 1 million people worldwide. The United States has been absolutely crippled by it. If the president's symptoms worsen and he does become incapacitated, what happens?
Well, what would happen with the 25th Amendment is the vice president would make a proposal with the cabinet. They would get together, the cabinet and the vice president, and the cabinet would vote. And if it's a majority vote that says that we need to transfer power to the vice president, then it gets transferred to the vice president, and the president has to stay out of it because he's not well enough to run the office. On the other hand, if the president disagrees with that and challenges it, then it has to go to the U.S. Congress, and two-thirds of Congress, two-thirds of each house has to vote to override the president and put the power in the hands of the vice president. That's the only succession mechanism that we've had. It was brought in when President Kennedy in 1963 was assassinated, and by 1967, this new amendment, 25th Amendment, was brought in to make a clear line of transition. That's the genius of America, the transition from one administration to the other, from one politician to the other with peaceful means of transfer. This has to continue.
Next debate, 2 weeks' time. It's hard to think it will work. Could you do a virtual debate? It's so fresh after him contracting coronavirus.
Yeah, it's only 2 weeks away. That's the time period it might take to see whether or not he's, what condition he's going to be in. And we don't know what he'll be in and whether the virtual debate can go on or whether the debate gets canceled or there's just town halls with each person speaking on their own. So we don't really know yet because we have to wait to see how the president comes through health-wise. And if he does come through in the next few days, he doesn't come down heavily with anything, then it should be okay to go forward with the debate. But, you know, Joe Biden had to get tested because they were both in the same room, and Joe Biden came out with a negative test result.
It was a pretty ordinary debate, wasn't it? Like, it just went straight to the gutter real quick.
It was horrible in many cases, and I think I have to place the blame primarily on the president because he didn't really observe decorum or the rules of the debate. He kept over talking against the other candidate, Biden, as well as overriding the moderator. Chris Wallace, the moderator, lost complete control of it from the very beginning, and President Trump didn't want to pull back and to comply by the 2-minute limits and comply by the non-interruptions. He kept interrupting, and this caused Biden to try to play defense, but to try to come across as some semblance of sanity. And in that sense, Biden did come out ahead. And I believe the polling showed, instant polling, in the CNN poll at least, was 60% said that Biden won, and about 29% said that President Trump won. So in the general polling in the public now, since the debate's been a few days old, it's about a flat majority over that said that Biden won over the president, who got much less than that. So I don't think the president's attitude and the way he handled that debate benefited him at all. It could have actually hurt him with a few voters.
It was very different to the manner in which he conducted himself with the debates with Hillary Clinton, wasn't it? He obviously the spacing wasn't needed to be there because there was no coronavirus, but his manner was so different.
It certainly was, and he seemed to want to double down on the coronavirus issue. He wanted to show that he's a tough guy, took out his mask from his pocket and said, you know what, I've got a mask, but I only wear it when I need to. And that's barely seldom ever. And he started haranguing Joe Biden about wearing a mask and making fun of him for wearing a mask all the time and wearing a very large mask. So I think he was trying to make a point politically to get his supporters riled up and get some of their friends and relatives to go out and register to vote for him and turn out more people from that side by saying, look, I'm fine, I'm healthy here, I have no mask on, I rarely use it. Look at Biden, he's a whole scaredy cat. And, you know, he tried to portray that. It kind of backfired on him, particularly with this situation right now, which is very tragic.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a very human story involved here. Boris Johnson, they were moments away from intubating him, and he was out of action for months.
Yes, indeed. The Prime Minister of Britain came down coronavirus very much earlier in the season, and he really had it hard, like you said, very close to intubation. And so Boris Johnson, has changed his mind about the necessity of wearing masks, about the necessity of social distancing and contact tracing, which President Trump should have done early on. We would not have this 200 and something thousand people in America died already from this if the president had taken quick and swift action early on back in February when he knew how severe this was. His intelligence services, his trade advisor told him about what's going on in China and said, this is a pandemic and it's going to come to the United States. It's going to affect our economy as well as our people. Get on it. And the president said later on, he admitted and said, I didn't really want to scare the American people. I don't want to talk about that too much. And that was a big, huge mistake. It was a tragedy because so many thousands of lives could have been saved. And I hope that this event, which is a tragic one for anyone to suffer, will help change his mind to be very serious about fixing this if he comes back, when he comes back into office, into the picture.
Yep, absolutely. Look, just changing tack slightly, who's going to win this election?
If I were to call the election today, I would say definitely Joe Biden would win the popular vote and the electoral college vote, because those swing states are heavily in Biden's favor, the key ones anyway. And even Florida is in play. Biden is ahead by 1 point. In Florida, of all places where it's an automatic lock for Republicans almost always, and Biden is very close in Texas, 2 Republican states. So that's in addition to the swing states. So I do believe that there's a kind of an unpredictability factor here with what happened to the president and the first lady, with the coronavirus, and that factors to how people react to it. Also, how many people will continue to go to the polls and vote, or how many more might vote by mail now that they saw even the president getting sick. Even some Republicans might switch their mind about going to the polls. We don't know yet exactly. We have to wait for a few more days to make any prediction. But I would predict if the election were held today, then Joe Biden would definitely win it.
Professor Peter Mathews, it has been one remarkable year full of stories, and it's not going anywhere. There's quite a bit to play out yet. Always good to have a chat.
Good to talk to you, Tim. Thank you so much.